Are you ready? Because I'm about to take you on a journey into science, okay? I want to try and show you science in a completely different way, so something completely different than what you're used to in school or what you've seen previously. All right, here's your first word. Wow, what a surprise, it's science, okay? What I want you to do, the piece of papers that you have in front of you, do you all have paper? Oh, somebody shook their head. In the paper that you have in front of you, can you just draw for me anything that comes into your head when you see the word science? Anything, doesn't matter what it is, don't worry what person next to you is drawing, just draw something that makes you think of science, okay? So draw something that makes you think of science, and also, if you've got time, draw a scientist, what you think a scientist looks like, okay? So you start drawing, and while you're drawing, I'm going to tell you a story. So you've got some time to do some drawing, okay? Now, what I want to tell you for my little story is, it's a bit of a secret actually. When I was at school, I hated science. Yep, you heard me, I hated science. And you're like, what? But you're like a science lecturer and you do all this science around the world. Why did you hate science at school? Well, the reason was, I just couldn't see how it was relevant, okay? I couldn't see how I was going to ever use it. And then I thought, well, what's the point of learning about it if I'm never going to use it, okay? And I carried on like that, and I was quite happy like that, until I discovered the most amazing dating technique I have ever come across, okay? And I thought this technique was amazing. I'm like, I so want to use this. I want to understand it and I want to use it, okay? And then I realized I'm going to need physics, I'm going to need chemistry, I'm going to need maths to really understand this dating technique. So I was like, wow, this is pretty cool. And then I thought, well, you know, when I was at school, if somebody had sat me down and said, Kira, listen, you're going to have to know about electrons in a crystal lattice. And one day you are going to be leading a science lab and dating dead things and going all around the world doing the most crazy stuff, I would have been like, yep, sign me up for double physics. Great. Now I can see a purpose. Now I can see a reason why I need the science. So today, in this talk, what I want to do is be the person that sits you down and shows you the connection between what you're learning at school right now and how you can actually use that to make the most amazing career and have the most amazing life, okay? So that's my goal for today. Hopefully now you've been able to scribble down and draw something that makes you think of science. So the person who's the little scribe who's gonna comment on things for me, I'm gonna send you the first question, if this works. Please work. Yep, there we go. So the question is, for the scribes who are telling me what's going on in the schools, what did most students draw? And when I asked you about science, so what did you draw? You may well have had kind of images like that, yeah? Crazy scientists, lots of bubbling test tubes, big science experiments, scientists with big crazy hair. I'm not sure about the crazy hair. Maybe I've got crazy hair, I don't know. But big crazy hair for some reason, kind of explosions, all that kind of stuff, all right? That's how most people see science. And if you notice, pretty much all those scientists in those pictures I've put up, they're all wearing lab coats. But the reality is, of course, you don't need to wear a lab coat to actually do science, okay? What does a scientist that you've drawn look like? Okay, have a look at your scientist. What do they look like? Now tell me honestly, have you drawn a man or have you drawn a woman? It's okay if you've drawn either, it's not a problem. It's just interesting how people perceive scientists and what they think a scientist would actually look like, okay? When I did this search for these images that you can see up right now, I got 75 million hits for scientist, pictures like that, yeah? I was really hard pressed to find one of those pictures as a woman, okay? I had to search really hard to find these images. And I mean really hard, okay? So for some reason, people have this idea that women aren't really seen in science and that it's not maybe the career for them, so they don't actually see themselves in science. But the reality is, women do just as well in science as men do. But for some reason, they just don't see themselves in those careers. Okay, so what I want to show you now are some images. And I want you to tell me, well, not tell me, you can't tell me, you've got to tell me in your head, whether or not these make you think of science, okay? So here's my first image. Do those images make you think of science? Okay? Just answer in your head, yes or no. These images, these ones, these ones. Oh, the suspense. These ones. So these images make you think of science. Look, it's just me on holiday. And these ones as well, okay? Do any of these images make you think of science, okay? If you answered no to any of those images, then you would actually be incorrect, I'm afraid, because these were all taken on research projects around the globe. So science has many different forms. If you notice, none of those pictures had lab coats. None of those pictures had, you know, beakers and crazy science explosions or anything like that. But it's all science. So science is a much bigger thing than you think about it. Science is really a way of looking at the world, okay? We use it every day. We use it in the way we interact with our environment. We use it in the way that we try and explain processes around us. And generally trying to explain the world. So in theory, we are all scientists. We all question everything that we see. We all make a hypothesis about things. We all have an idea of how things are. And we all sometimes go out and try and find data to try and support that idea or that hypothesis. Okay, so for example, if I said to you, it's always sunny in Australia, and that's my hypothesis, yeah? But then you could then show me some data on rainfall in Australia and show me that it's not always sunny in Australia, and that would then falsify my hypothesis. Do you know what? That's science. That's science right there in a nutshell, okay? So science is not necessarily just test tubes and beakers and explosions. It can be a lot wider than that. Okay, so these are kind of words that I think of when I think about science. Shocking, mysterious, unpredictable, revealing, adventurous, pushing back boundaries, dynamic, surprising, and even inspiring, okay? So that's what I think of when I think of science. That's how I see science, and that's how I see my career, okay? So if your school, when you're at school and you do science, those are the kind of ideas that you get from science, then good on you, you're doing well. But if it isn't, then teachers, listen up teachers, that's your goal. That's what I want all your students to say about your classes, okay? It is really something very, very different than sometimes it's perceived as. Okay, so why do I love science? Well, basically, I discovered that a grain of sand can tell you how old something is, okay? And when I discovered that a grain of sand can tell you how old things are, I thought this was like a gift, like something magic. It's like, wow, so I can tell when something happened just from a grain of sand, yeah? So I can tell when humans first arrived in Australia. I can tell when megafauna became extinct. I can work out when people first used stone tools, or even when dinosaurs became extinct, all from grains of sand. And I thought, wow, this is such a cool technique. This is such an amazing thing. And it really opened up the world to me. And I thought, what an amazing opportunity to really create something amazing, okay? We use science every day. We're all scientists, as I said before. Lost where I am. So this means that I could basically find the age for anything, okay? And this is really the key to understanding the planet. And this is why I got really into science. But science is not easy. Science is hard. Science is probably the hardest thing I have ever done in my life. It's so challenging. There's so many factors in it that really change the outcome. And that's what's so good about it. Don't be scared of something that you find hard. You know, a lot of people say, oh, I hate maths, it's really hard. But see it as a challenge. See it as something that you want to try and get to grips with, okay? I talk to professors that have been working in science for 40 years, and they still tell me, we're only scratching the surface of our understanding, which is amazing. You can spend 40 years at something and still only have a very small understanding of what's really going on. What a challenge. What an amazing way to spend your life trying to find out these answers. So that's why I love science. So I just want to talk to you a little bit about what I actually do in science. And I do a dating technique called optically stimulated luminescence. It's a very fancy sounding name, okay? But all it is see, if you can they see the mouse? Yeah. So basically all it is these are quartz grains. And what happens is, over time, these quartz grains will build up a signal while they're buried within sediment, okay? So as long as I don't expose those quartz grains to light, when I take them back to the lab, if I shine a laser at these grains, they will actually give off a light. And this light is called luminescence. And this is luminescence here. Isn't it beautiful? Look at that. These are quartz grains luminescing. Very similar to like bioluminescence that you get in biology. You know, you see things glowing on the beach and all that kind of stuff. But this is an inorganic process. So it's not organic, it's inorganic. But basically the amount of light that comes off tells me how long those quartz grains have been accumulating signal. So it's a really, really amazing technique, and it really is a passport to understanding everything. So from this dating technique, I've discovered that I love dead things. Dead things are amazing because I can actually date them. I can actually tell when they died, okay? And if you know when something died, then you can tell a lot about why they became extinct, and it also tells you a lot about the things that survived. So some things became extinct, but other things survived. Now, why did some things die out and other things survive? It tells us a lot about the survival capabilities and the adaptation capabilities of the things that actually survived, okay? So one really good example of this is when you look at primates and humans, okay? We are actually primates as well, but we like to call ourselves humans. On this is a big family tree, and down here we have primates, and over this side here we have humans. And what's so interesting about this is so many of these species, not these primates here, but so many of all of the human species, apart from Homo sapiens, which is the modern day human, all of them have become extinct. Have you ever wondered why there's only one species of human? If you look at all the other animals, there's lots and lots of different species of animals, of like, you know, tiger or bear or something. There's lots of different species of bear. But humans, there's only one species surviving. Have you ever wondered why? Isn't that amazing? Why only one species? All of these species of human that you can see here have all become extinct, okay? And dating allows me to work out exactly when these species became extinct, and then we can start to think about why they may have become extinct, okay? And then we can start to, and the fact that they became extinct tells us a lot about humans, about how amazing we are at actually surviving and adapting to our situation. So here we have a very large species of, it's called Gigantopithecus. And he really was that tall, over 3 meters tall, massive, massive ape that lived about 300,000 years ago. And you can see compared to these other, look, there's a gorilla. You know how tall a gorilla stands. Almost double the height there. And if this video played, it would actually show you the other species that I wanted to show you, which was Homo floresiensis, which is a tiny little human that we found over 10 years ago in Flores. And she was only 1 meter tall. So I don't know if you can see the cursor there, but she would only come up to pretty much Giganto's bottom. That's the height that she would have come up to. And modern humans are usually about 2 meters tall. So you can see the difference in height. So these are the species I want to talk to you about. And they caused a massive media splash when we first made these discoveries. A tiny, tiny little human that was only 1 meter tall that lived probably about 50,000 years ago on Flores Island. And Gigantopithecus, a 3 meter tall ape that walked around about 300,000 years ago. So huge media splash. When the Hobbit, we call it nicknamed the Hobbit, when it first came out about 10 years ago, this is the kind of media coverage that it got. You can see front page National Geographic, front page Nature. It was huge. I think it had 1.5 million hits when the embargo hadn't even broken. So the media hadn't even released the news, and it already had 1.5 million hits just from seeping over the sides of the embargo. And just like when Kim Kardashian went nude, Hobbit nearly broke the internet. So there you go. Maybe the Hobbit is the Kim Kardashian of archaeology. I don't know. But anyway, so it was pretty amazing stuff. I've got a video here just kind of going over some of these thoughts and ideas, and I hope you can hear the sound. There we go. There we go.
The largest ever primate to walk the planet would have towered over the smallest human if they had ever met. Two evolutionary dead ends with valuable stories to tell. Gigantopithecus blacki, or Giganto, stood almost 3 meters tall, weighing 150 kilos, and was vegetarian. Homo floresiensis, or the Hobbit, was a mere 1 meter tall and hunted Komodo dragon. What do these fascinating creatures have in common, and what can they tell us about our own survival? These mysteries can be unravelled by the dating of a grain of sand. Luminescence dating is a technique that harnesses a light-sensitive signal to estimate the time since minerals, such as quartz and feldspar, were buried in the cave. The amount of light, or luminescence, is proportional to the time since burial, and hence the deposition age of the associated fossils.
The value of luminescence is that it can be applied to all sedimentary environments. So we've been working really hard to try and develop techniques specifically for cave environments, which then makes it a really valuable tool for dating Giganto and Hobbit remains. We're using single grain methods because they can produce a much more precise age, and then we can really define this extinction window. And once we know the extinction window, then we've got a really good chance of then trying to identify the causes for extinction within a really constrained time period.
Using multidisciplinary techniques, we've been able to reconstruct the climates and the environments of the Hobbit, how they lived, how they behaved, and the prevailing climatic conditions. This allows us to put skin on their bones and learn their stories. The same goes for Giganto. Detailed analysis of their teeth using a scanning electron microscope has really revealed their dietary preferences and allowed us to understand the level of environmental dependence. Now all we need to do is build up this evidence of how the environments have changed during this extinction window. Two diverse species at either end of the human tree, displaying striking similarities that can both help us to understand about modern human capabilities and adaptation. The value of their stories is unlocked by dating and the definition of their precise extinction windows. But there is much to learn about these fascinating evolutionary dead ends, and research into the long and the short of their extinction is ongoing.
All right, so I hope you enjoyed that. That was just telling you a little bit about the science and what I do. But what I want to finish with is that science is really a huge part of our lives. And it will become more and more important as we face certain environmental issues and in crisis in the future. Science is going to become more important because of the fact that we need to work out a way of interacting with the world sustainably and to be able to survive on this planet. So science really is a really big thing. And you know, we're all scientists. We're all scientists if we are passionate about understanding the world around us. So why women in science? Women are really important to science. They're really valuable because they deliver a unique perspective on science. They interpret data in a very different way to men, and they also drive the research direction in a very different way than men. And that's why it's so important that we have women in science. And the government have really realised this, and they're really trying to push to increase the numbers of women in science. Because, you know, science without women goes in a very, very different direction, different research direction, and it looks like a very, very different discipline. So my whole take-home message for you guys to remember today is be open to new ideas, okay? You never know how things are going to change. Look at me. I hated science at school, and I've ended up being a radiation physicist. How did that happen? Okay, so just be really open. Science career and a science at school are two different things. They're really different. You need to learn the basics at school so then you can go on and do the crazy, crazy stuff later on, okay? Be free to be led in a different direction. What I started off in doing physical geography, I've ended up working with archaeologists and paleoanthropologists and biologists. So, you know, just it can take you in different directions as long as you're open to it and you're open to opportunities. Whenever you get an opportunity, jump on it. I was 21 and I got offered to go to Hong Kong to do a master's and I didn't look back, I just went for it. Different country, different thing, just go for it. You know, be open. Don't worry if your plans change, let them develop. People are when they come to university, they're very much like, I know exactly what I want to do. And within the first semester, they've already changed their degree because new things open up to them and new ideas and they kind of change direction. So science is not boring. Whenever you're sitting in a science class and you're thinking, oh man, get me out of here. Where's my phone? I want to start texting. So just think, it's not boring, it's exciting, it's dynamic. You just need to learn the basics so then you can go on and fly, basically. Science will expand your mind and push you into the limits of your capabilities and beyond. Don't let anyone persuade you that science is not for women. I was told when I was younger, yeah, it's not a good discipline for women. Not true. We need women in science. Women, you know, science is a completely different beast without women. We really need women in science. So the reason we need it is because we make science work. That's why. So that's my message, that's my whole thing. I hope you liked the journey. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them if you send them through the online chat. I spent a long time at uni. As you may notice, I'm not Australian. I was actually born in England. So most of my uni career was in England. I did a Bachelor of Science in physical geography. So I was really into rocks, mountain, rivers, all those kind of things. And then after finishing that, I went down to London and I did a master's in quaternary science, which is looking at reconstructing ice ages. I was really into glacial activity and looking at climates and environments of the past. And then from my master's in London, I went to Hong Kong. In London, that's where I discovered OSL dating, the dating technique I was talking about. So then I went to Hong Kong and I did a master's in Hong Kong doing OSL dating. And then after that, I had a bit of a break. I actually went scuba diving around Southeast Asia for about 3 or 4 years. That was my bumming around phase. It was great. I had a really good time. Ran scuba diving shops and did all that kind of crazy stuff. And then I came back to it because I got offered a PhD down in Wollongong, working in Flores. That was before we'd found the Hobbit, so we didn't know about the Hobbit at that point. I knew that was my destiny.
Fantastic.
So I did that.
Quite a story.
Sorry. I did a lot of uni.
That's great.
I really liked history, which is kind of strange, but that's why I connect really well with archaeology, I think, because of that kind of history side to it. But yeah, I liked history. I like dance. I like kind of just random stuff, really.
Fantastic,
Yeah. So, you know, don't close yourself off too much because you never know where things are going to take you.
That's really good advice.
Yeah. I have 4 degrees. So 4 unis, yeah, it's a lot. You don't need to do that much. It's a little bit excessive. It's just I got into one thing and then I found something else and I found something else and I kind of just went a bit crazy. But yeah, 4 degrees is a bit excessive, so you don't have to go there. I can give you really good examples of how women change research. One of them is that in the past, when they did understanding of the biology of the human body, they always did analysis on an average human male. Okay, so they never really brought gender into it. And so there were circumstances when women would come into hospital thinking that they're having a heart attack. And because the physiology of the body was understood for males, not really for females, they were sent home saying, you're fine, don't worry about it. And then they would have a heart attack when they got home. Because the female body reacts and works in a very different way to the male body. So then they realized that they need women in science so that they can actually address that gender imbalance and make sure that, you know, the average analysis is not done on just a male, it's just also done on a female. So that's one really good example of why we need women, because women then drive that research, you know? So if you get lots of men in research, they want to research things like male pattern baldness or being, you know, but then you have women in research and they want to do research into, you know, seatbelts, the effect of seatbelts on women when they're pregnant. So it just drives research in a different direction. That's why it's really important that we have women. I know roughly the timing, but now that we know the timing, we can start to really look at the causes. So it may have been environmental. For the Hobbit, it may well have been competition from when modern humans actually arrived on the island. So now we've got to build up the data around that extinction window. So making the extinction window is the hardest bit. Once we've got that, then we can work out the causes. Industry is a little bit harder because I work with archaeologists and paleoanthropologists, and everything's very, very paleo. It's more difficult. I mean, the technology side, I use lasers for the actual dating. So there's the industry development of technology and the way in which we use this technology to actually answer research questions. So there's always that technological development. So that's a good industry conduct. But yeah, working in paleo and you know, things in the past is always quite hard to kind of get that industry connection. But technology side of it, definitely. Great. Thank you, guys.